The title of your TED Talk was "The Future is Polyrhythmic." Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Is there anybody else, to your knowledge, in the world that's interested in it or has taken it to...
I haven't found anybody. I'd like to find someone to work with, or someone to play with, or someone to sort of take their ideas and play with them. I think there have been some sort of things done with having, orchestras playing with lots of people playing different kind of speed patterns and that kind of thing. But, Stockhausen even did a piece with three orchestras all playing different stuff. And I've heard it, and it's very demanding. It sounds kind of it's very interesting.
Demanding to listen to.
It's very interesting. But that's not sort of what I'm going for. I haven't found anybody else doing what I'm doing. There might well be someone out there doing what I'm doing that I haven't come across.
There's a big difference between three orchestras playing together and what you could bring to an orchestra with polyrhythmy. Would you see that being something you'd be interested in doing?
Well, not at the moment anyway. See, I think one of the things that I find a useful limitation is the limitation of what one human can do on one instrument. And once you start to see you've got like 20 violins, you can get them playing something completely unhearable, something you could never, as a human, actually comprehend. And by making the limitation for myself of I have to be able to do it, I can guarantee that it's definitely possible to hear and comprehend because one person's doing it. So you can hear all those lines in one go if you get used to listening to it. If during the course of my work I kind of found systems and found equations that sort of limited in a really beautiful way the options, then I might consider it. But at the moment I'm still in the process of exploding the options while in some senses limiting them down. But I feel like I want to kind of chuck the kitchen sink in first and get as many things going as I can and then distill them down. So perhaps if I had principles or discovered things about polyrhythm or some kind of solid principles or structures, then I might do that. Someone else might do that. It's funny that actually Chopin on the piano just almost only wrote for the piano. He wrote a couple of piano concertos for some orchestra, but it was basically only piano he wrote for. And yet he's massively influential as a composer because of what he did like harmonically, what he did rhythmically and structurally and that kind of thing. So it might be that just for me and at this time, the piano and the harp a bit, but mainly the piano is what really drives me. I don't feel like that strong inspiration to go and write for an orchestra at the moment.
So you've written the Etude by Eddie Chilvers, but the next pieces will ultimately be pieces of improvised.
They might be.
They'll come and they'll go.
They might be, but the thing is that on the way to this ideal of completely music of the moment, completely free music, on the way to that, there's things like the Etude and other things I'm playing with, just other structures. I do really like them, and it's kind of like a path on the way to something. So it doesn't really feel like it's up to me because stuff just arrives. You're sitting at the piano one day and an idea arrives, and you just didn't decide to have an idea. You didn't think, I think I'll have an idea today. You just have an idea, and whatever idea arrives when it arrives. It doesn't feel like I've got much jurisdiction over that. So it just seems like what's happening is piano mainly, bit of drums, bit of harp.
And within the piano, so going back to the piano and where you see polyrhythmy going just right now for you at the moment with piano.
Yeah.
You talked about, you feel that you're moving towards a greater spaciousness within the music. And
yes, I think, from a certain point of view, all music wants to point back to silence, point back to space. And it's finding, before I could go into great spaciousness, I needed to get all the drills in place. So I actually had to be locked in 5, 3, 7, happening at the same time. That's hard enough without taking gaps out. It's actually much easier to play all of the notes every time than it is to play with lots of gaps. But just now, as I've got particular rhythms drilled quite well, I can start to put gaps in and leave more and more gaps. And it's really quite hard to do. But what I'm playing with a lot at the moment is trying to pull out more and more gaps and patterns of gaps in different spaces and unexpected spaces and an implied note, but then having a space instead. And having 4 parts, 4 time worlds happening, but not necessarily all together. They're kind of coming in and out, weaving in and out, and the different ways they can emerge and subside and all that kind of thing. So yeah, space is my big main thing that I'm...
It becomes an absolutely integral part of the texture that you talk about.
Well, it is in all kinds of music. All good kind of music uses space well. All good improvisers use space really, really well. And it's just a lot harder to do in polyrhythm because it's very difficult to hold on to the different speeds when it's not there and to bring it back in and out again. You know, when you've got 4 going, it's like, right, I can feel that 4, I can feel those 4 just about. Then you take one out, do something else, bring it back again, and it's hard. But I'm getting there with it, and it's definitely a lot easier than it was even just a year ago. And one thing that is starting to emerge more is free time. So that's when their speeds are they're not any number, they're just going random speeds. But by having done all these drills for years and years and years of these different speeds, I find my hands can be completely independent to do all kinds of speed changes. And that in itself is really, really interesting, just random speeds. But then from that random speed, a polyrhythm can emerge. It can then develop into another polyrhythm, or it can subside back into randomness. So there's this relationship between the space and the notes, but also the order and the randomness. And that order and randomness can apply harmonically with very, very strict order to total disorder, to things in between, like... which has got a certain sense of order, but a certain sense of disorder as well. So that constant interplay between these different things. I need a better word than things. The constant interplay between these different forces of like space and sound and form and disorder. And there's like, just like in nature, there's that interplay of those things. Like all the interesting stuff happens on the boundary between...
polarities.
Is that clear? Like the boundary, like a star is right at the point between gravity, the pull of gravity, and the explosion of the nuclear forces going outwards. It's just sitting exactly between those, balance between those two forces. And that's when it's most interesting. If gravity was too strong, it would just collapse in a black hole. And if it was weaker, then something would just explode outwards, and you wouldn't get all of the exciting elements that make up life.
So you're using that analogy really to talk about the control, the order, that it's on the edge. It's where those are dipping in and out.
It's
of
like the
order,
relationship
disorder.
between chaos and order, and the relationship between free time and polyrhythm, and not just the relationship between them, but the transition between one to the other.
Yeah.
It's the transitions that's really interesting. I think that's kind of what I think about when I think about nature as well, like the turbulence, the transition between states, even just like things like water, when it like dribbles at a certain speed and it's got a certain shape, but then when it goes a bit faster, it takes a different kind of shape. The transition between those two states that's what's really interesting. And
it's the boundaries, isn't it? The segues. It's where the exciting things happen.
Yeah, Wagner said about music that it's the art of competition is the art of transition, and it's really his transitions that are the most extraordinary thing in his music. How he gets from one place to another, particularly in the ring. You know, the transitions are just amazing. And when you think of pieces of music that you love, if you think of your best bit, it's probably a transition bit. It's probably moving from the verse into the chorus, or moving from the chorus into the solo, or it's probably a transition, the best bit.
And in a sense, your music has that feel about it with the polyrhythms, that it's constantly in a state of transition.
It wants to be in a constant transition. That's it, because in music, if you think about so much music, it's like it's very nice. And then there's the amazing bit, and then it's all kind of quite nice. But to be able to get the amazing bit all the time means the music needs to be constantly in transition, which is what life ultimately is. Is a constant transition. And if music can be constantly in a state of constant transition between all these different elements, a constant transition between chaos and order, and between harmony and dissonance, and between free time and polyrhythm. But it's brilliant if the nothing after the music is awesome. If a piece ends so that after the last note there's a really powerful nothing, a really powerful spaciousness. That's why endings are so difficult.
So it's fabulous. You've just set yourself up for it.
Well, I'll do my best. I tried to end the etude that way. Like the ending of them was sort of, I had in mind, I wanted to create a massive loud silence after the end. That's why it ends in the way that it does. With a big kind of and suddenly silent.